Hello guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube and welcome to part 5 of my 5,000 subscriber Q&A series. Kind of worked out well, didn't it? Now there will be a part 6 because I'm no way going to get through all these questions in this segment. We're going to dive right in. First question. Sean, as a 90s kid, there were two artists I loved, Bob Ross and the painter of light, Thomas Kinkade. I hope to own both their original works one day. Of the two, who has the better investment power? And how do you see both their markets in the future? You're going to hate me for this. I would not invest in either of these artists at present time. Thomas Kinkade especially. I have a video planned on this, guys. You guys are very good at getting out of me some of these video concepts that are very esoteric that I have planned for this channel. Thomas Kinkade was very well known in the 1990s because he was over-commercialized. Almost in every major high-end shopping mall, there was a Thomas Kinkade store where you could buy merchandise and prints of his original artworks. Now, he was very popular among Christians because he was known as the painter of light. But the problem is, even if you were to own an original piece of his, the market value just isn't there because he's an over-commercialized artist. Is there still people paying a premium for his works on the secondary market? I'm talking about original works, not the prints that he offered in those retail locations. The answer is yes. There are people that do like his work, but he was panned by art critics. And as a result, very few serious art collectors take his work seriously. The same thing is unfortunately true of Bob Ross, with few exceptions. Bob Ross is a very talented painter. I know a lot of people that grew up in the 90s used to watch his show. They used to love his style, the way that he presented his teachings on teaching people how to paint. But today, not too many serious collectors in the art community, mainly the high-end art community, are clamoring to own a Bob Ross original. Do those pieces have value? They do. But overall, compared to Andy Warhol, compared to some of your other contemporary artists that are fetching hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in the art market today, these artists are not the best artists to invest in over the long term. So I'm sorry to give you that bad piece of advice, but it's just something that I would tell you if you paid me for a consultation in the antiques and collectibles trade and said, hey, Sean, I want you to analyze the market for original Thomas Kinkade paintings or original Bob Ross paintings. It's the conclusion that I would give you. So I'm only being fair. Next question. Sean, I appreciate your advice, and a lot of your points seem rational. I was wondering if you could provide advice on how to be a good speculator, or does speculation always boil down to essentially gambling? First of all, speculation is gambling. When you invest in the stock market, when you invest in real estate, there are fundamentals, cash flows, costs, debt to asset ratios that you can analyze to decide if you are making a good investment decision over the short term and or over the long term. When you invest in a lot of pop culture collectibles in the antiques and collectibles trade, guess what? You're at the whim of speculation. Now, if you want to invest in rare coins, if you want to invest in traditional antiques, if you want to invest in investment grade paintings, items that have been on sale in the overall antiques and collectibles trade for hundreds of years, yeah, you can go back and kind of put the odds in your favor just by analyzing the price history of an 1880 Carson City Morgan silver dollar, or the price of a Monet or a Picasso, or certain Tiffany vases, or if you want to talk like a Chinese Ming Dynasty vase. If you want to look at the value as to how that appreciated over the last several hundred years, you can do that, and you can put the odds in your favor. But overall, speculation is akin to gambling. Now, I know certain people are going to disagree. They're going to state, Sean, if you go after vintage Magic the Gathering cards or vintage Pokemon cards, you can pretty much assess the market because since the last 20-some years where those products first came on the scene, they are coveted. They are moving slowly towards possibly becoming established markets in the antiques and collectibles trade. And I would agree with that. But there's still a lot of risk there because you have decades to go before they transition over to established markets in the overall antiques and collectibles trade. And even if they do cross over, look what happened to Hummels. Hummels literally within the last 30 years became an established collecting category in the antiques and collectibles trade. And guess what? Very few people want to own them anymore. There's a couple of rare Hummels that do fetch for thousands of dollars on the secondary market, but those are exceptions. They're no longer the rule. So you really have to analyze how these markets operate, what your goal is as a speculator, as a collector, as an investor. Watch some of the videos that I've done on speculation in the antiques and collectibles trade and start there as a starting point. You also want to have a written plan. You also want to decide how much you can afford to risk in some of these more speculative markets. And then if you compare those markets to investing in the stock market, investing in traditional asset classes, real estate, or even comparing it to other speculative assets like gold, silver, cryptocurrency, you may decide that other markets hold a much better fit for what you're trying to accomplish. But yes, speculation is akin to gambling. There is no way around that. If you take any courses on finance, one of the first things they're going to teach you is the difference between speculating and investing. It's a concept that I present on this channel, and it's always controversial because a lot of the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters tear me up whenever I bring that up because in their eyes, they equate speculating with investing. And unfortunately, there are differences there. A lot of hardcore fundamental differences that separates a sophisticated investor from that of a starry-eyed speculator. Next question. Sean, after watching quite a few of your videos, I have seen you mention Rudy at Alpha Investments on multiple occasions in a positive way. That said, I am sure you have some criticisms of him. Care to elaborate on any of them? In all honesty, I do not. This is what I will say about the problem that I have with the mindset of some of the people that watch his channel and mine. What happens is a lot of people will come to my channel and they'll attack me and they'll say, hey, Sean, look at Rudy with Alpha Investments. He put all of his money in Magic the Gathering cards and products, and now he's worth 7 figures. The problem with that assessment is if you watch any of Rudy's videos where he talks about his origins and how he got his start, and again, I don't want to put any words in his mouth. I'm just using what was said in a lot of his earlier videos and a lot of the videos that he does to this day. He will tell you he did not put all of his money in Magic the Gathering. He had a lot of money in corporate bonds. He made money in Wall Street. He also owned real estate. And to this day, he owns a lot of traditional asset classes, to my knowledge. So that's the criticism that I have. It's more along the mindset of the average person that doesn't watch all of his videos, just watches a video here and there, and then wants to argue with me. Well, look at Rudy with Alpha Investments. He put all of his money in Magic the Gathering cards, and now he's a millionaire. Rudy also got lucky by being able to come into that market in its infancy, go after reserve list cards when they were selling for a fraction of the price that they're selling for today. You're not going to be able to replicate that success overall, guys. Can you make money in that market? Absolutely. I make money in that market. Nothing against Rudy, nothing against any of you guys who speculate and invest in that market. But you have to understand, fundamentally, it is not the same market that it was when Rudy got into that market, when he was buying up a PSA 10 Alpha Underground C for $600 or $800 thinking that he got hosed. Well, today, that card's worth what, 20, 30 grand in PSA 10 condition? You can't replicate that type of success because the markets have fundamentally changed just in those years that Rudy was active in them. Another thing I will say, where I do differ a little bit on my investment style versus that of Rudy's, I'll use this as an example. I am sitting on 5 or 6 cases of War of the Spark Magic the Gathering booster boxes. My buy-in for those particular booster boxes was roughly $90 a box. If that War of the Spark booster box goes to $200, $225 anytime soon, I will sell my entire supply on the secondary market. I do not invest long-term in speculative assets like War of the Spark or other modern era Magic the Gathering products and booster boxes. Now, if we're talking about reserve list cards, if we're talking about factory sealed booster boxes that contain reserve list cards, that's another matter entirely. I have no problem if you tell me, Sean, I want to invest in a factory sealed booster box of Mirage, or I want to go after a Library of Alexandria card in PSA 10 condition and I want to hold it long term. If you want to invest in those markets and you know the risk, if you're going to invest in Magic the Gathering over the long term, you are better off going after vintage coveted reserve list products. So that is something that I do agree with Rudy, even though I would not be putting as much money as he is in that market over the long term. I would not be comfortable doing that. So that is something that you have to decide if you are a speculator or an investor in those markets. But overall, I have no problem with the concepts that Rudy presents on his channel. It's just my problem is with the mindset of the individual that may be watching that material who lacks critical thought, who doesn't understand how investing, finance, economics, and business works overall in the short term or over the long term. They may be making a very bad investment, in my opinion. So that's my only criticism. It's not of Rudy. It's of the type of person that may watch his content and get the wrong idea because they're not watching all of his videos. Rudy several times has said, you cannot put all your money in cardboard. You cannot put all your money in collectibles, and I agree 100% with those talking points. As a matter of fact, it's the crux of this channel. I tell you guys nonstop, you cannot put all your money in speculative assets and expect it to work out for you over the long term. It's not gonna, believe me. I know a lot of people in the antiques and collectibles trade, just in the years that I've been involved in it, that literally hit the wall by doing that. And they got into serious financial trouble. They got into serious trouble in their relationships. They ended up divorced in certain cases. It's a market where you have to understand the risks and you have to literally bet with your head and not over it, as they say in gambling, because that's pretty much what you're doing in some of these markets. Next question. Sean, what is your view on the old opinion articles dated around September 4th, 2019, where Michael Berry shared his views that index funds are like subprime CDOs? Okay, I do not give credence to a lot of naysayers in the financial markets. There's a lot of people in the financial markets that have this mindset. Everything's going to crash. It's going to go to zero. And the people hoarding cryptocurrency, collectibles, gold, silver are all going to be rewarded at some point. I'm sorry, guys. The financial markets, the risk of an absolute crash, meaning where everything goes to zero, not like 2008, not like 2009, not even like the Great Depression. I'm talking Great Depression 2.0, where there is a great reset of the financial markets in the year 2021 or beyond. I do not consider that a probability. There's probably less than 2% chance of that happening, and even that 2% chance is probably overblown. So whenever I hear somebody like Michael Burry or any of these other skeptics talk, I really don't listen. I try to listen to people that have a neutral talking point, like Warren Buffett, or even Mark Cuban, or Graham Stephan, or Dave Ramsey, or Susie Orman, or even Kevin O'Leary. If they want to talk about these markets, I'm happy to listen because they're not talking about the markets from a doomsday scenario standpoint. They're talking realistically as to where the average person should put their money. And I can prove to you firsthand that mutual funds are one of the major creators of millionaires in our modern era society, going back since their creation in the 1970s and the 1980s with the popularity of Vanguard funds, and the like. Mutual funds, especially index-based funds, are probably one of the best investments you yourself can invest in over the long term. Over the short term, you're absolutely right. The stock market is not for short-term investors. I've said this before. If you are a day trader, if you are one of these people that are investing in penny stocks or some of these $2 Chinese stocks that a lot of you guys are showing me on Facebook or other investing forums, that is a market, in my opinion, overall for suckers. You are not going to get rich in that market. If you want to get rich in the stock market, it's slow and steady over the long term, over a course of 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Those are the best investments. Next question. Sean, with all the money printing going on in our economy, especially with the Biden administration set to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by the year 2020, what implications do you see this having on the overall economy alongside with the antiques and collectibles trade? Okay, I'm going to let you in on a secret. You guys know where I stand politically, right? I'm on the left side of the equation. The Democrats don't really want to raise the minimum wage, just like the Republicans don't want to raise the minimum wage, because a lot of their high-profile donors don't like this talking point. They don't want to increase the quality of life and have to pay out more money for labor by raising the minimum wage. So as a result, one of the things that I always laugh at, when the Republicans under Trump introduced their $2 trillion tax cut, they had no problem getting it passed. When the Democrats try to raise the minimum wage and they try to attach it to the stimulus bill, what happens? A bipartisan council comes out and says, guess what? Really, you're not allowed to put forth through budget reconciliation a minimum wage increase. And I had to laugh. Very few Democrats outside of Bernie Sanders, who was really an independent, scoffed at the idea and said, well, wait a minute. Republicans were able to pass a tax decrease, which went to the upper 5% unproportionately, utilizing budget reconciliation. We can't pass a wage increase. And a lot of the Democrats just grinned and bare it and said, okay, we won't raise the minimum wage. Now, I'm not stating that you should vote one way or another. All is what I am stating is corporatist Democrats don't want to raise the minimum wage just as much as Republicans don't want to raise the minimum wage. So you got to look at it from that angle. So honestly, do I think eventually the Biden administration will get their way and the minimum wage will be increased? Yes, but there's a lot of members in Senate looking at you, Joe Manchin, or I should say Senator Joe Manchin, who are not too keen at passing this particular bill. And for those unaware, Joe Manchin is a very controversial Democrat senator. He has a net worth close to $7 million. He represents the state of West Virginia. And in my opinion, he ought to just have an R in front of his name. Now, to be fair, if you agree with Obamacare, if you agree with the Affordable Care Act, he did vote to preserve it. So in my opinion, that was a very good thing. But overall, I am not a fan of corporatist conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin. If you're a Republican, you're watching this, and you have an opposite political viewpoint, I understand why you may like Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is by no means a leftist. Joe Manchin is a very right-leaning conservative Democrat who has literally stood in the way of a lot of innovative and very progressive legislation that was brought forth over the last few years. So I personally am not a fan of Joe Manchin, but I understand if you're watching this and you're on the other political side of the spectrum, you might be a fan of Joe Manchin. So that's how I'm going to end that question. Good question, but I wouldn't worry about the minimum wage being raised anytime soon, given the fact that corporatist Democrats don't want to raise it just as much as Republicans don't want to raise it. Sean, I would love to hear your views on the current comic markets and its long-term collectability. It seems modern age comic books are now selling for prices unheard of. Do you believe that it's better to collect a modern age possible key comic book because of the ability for that value to raise quickly over a short period of time and possibly stay much higher than buy-in, though the price may also crash and burn? Or is it better to invest in a golden age book? So what this person is basically asking, Sean, is it better to buy a modern age comic book because the prices are more volatile and able to go up in value more readily, easily than that of an established golden age comic book or a certain silver age comic book that may be selling for a considerable sum? The answer is yes and no. Keep in mind, for something that can rise that quickly in value, it can also fall that quickly in value. Volatile assets are extremely speculative, and of course, they are volatile. So in this case, I would tell you, if you are very good at predicting trends, if you are very good at short-term speculating in the comic book marketplace, do you. If you're making money in this market with modern era comic books and your gains are a lot more than your losses to the point where you're turning a profit, keep churning and burning. But overall, if you are going to invest long-term in the comic book marketplace, you are going to have to put your money in established vintage comic books from the pre-1975 era. That's pretty much the cutoff. If you really wanted to be safer with your money, go after pre-1965 comic books and go after the big keys. That's one way of playing this market. But the modern era market for comic books is extremely speculative, and younger collectors are not going to flock to those items as collectibles in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I just don't see it. If they're going to collect comic books, they're probably going to want something from the Bronze Age, something from the Silver Age, possibly, with certain exceptions, something from the Copper Age. But I really don't see that market heating up even more in 10 to 20 years. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of those books were hoarded in mass. If you don't believe me, look at the CGC census. Look at how many copies of Amazing Spider-Man 300 are currently graded. Look at how many exist just in 9.8 condition grade at present time. Next question. Sean, can somebody please explain why third-party grading companies automatically charge you more if your item is worth more? Simply because they can. And also, in all honesty, I am going to defend the grading companies here. It also comes down to insurance. The fact that they are storing that particular item in their vaults and they are responsible for it, why it's in their possession. For instance, if you send in 10 Pokemon cards that are worth $100 a piece, that's $1,000. If somebody sends in one holo foil Charizard card from the first edition base set in PSA 10 condition, or it's going to get a grade of PSA 10, that card is worth what? $500,000 at present time, almost $500,000. So therefore, guess what? That states that they have to pay a higher insurance rate to store that particular item while it's in their possession. That's why they do charge more. It comes down to not only the fact that they can, but it also comes down to the cost of insurance and the fact that they are responsible for that collectible until, in some cases, until it leaves their door, and in other cases, until it's delivered to your door. So that is a tremendous risk that they are undertaking. So it's not a scam per se. I understand why you can look at it from that standpoint, and I have yet to do any videos on insurance in regards to the antiques and collectibles market. Those videos are still in proverbial development hell. But when I do release those videos, you'll see why this is important, especially if you are somebody out there that wants to live in a $200,000 home and own a $100,000 graded video game and put it on display. The video that I do on insurance and why that's probably not a good idea is coming, and it's going to disappoint a lot of you out there. Next question, and this is going to be the final question for this particular part 5,000 subscriber Q&A series. Part 6 will drop in several more days, so please watch for it. This goes on to state, congratulations on 5,000 subscribers. I have a question for your upcoming Q&A, which we are now in, regarding video games. Zelda Skyward Sword HD is coming to the Nintendo Switch in July 2021, and I own a quote-unquote rare Zelda Skyward Sword not for resale demo, unsealed for the Nintendo Wii. Does WATA or VGA grade single CDs? And if I got it graded, what would you value the item at? What about a Mario Party 9 not for resale demo disc that is sealed? These items are very hard to appraise at present time, given how speculative the market is for vintage video games. I do know there is a premium placed on not for resale items like this. I would not get them graded. Your best bet is to just list them as is on eBay. That is my best advice at present time. The grading fees are really going to grind against the value of these items, especially given the fact that these are both Nintendo Wii items. We're not talking about anything from the coveted GameCube era or the Nintendo 64 era, items of that nature. Given the fact that these are Nintendo Wii games and a lot of people were already collecting this stuff, I would not get them graded. I would simply list them on eBay and do the best that you can with them. There is not a reason to get these items graded, except in few exceptions. And in my opinion, a Mario Party 9 that is sealed and a not for resale demo disc, and an open Zelda Skyward Sword not for resale demo disc are not two items that are going to be too coveted. You will get a premium for them if you list them on eBay. I guarantee they most likely will sell. Be happy with the profits you're taking from that. Put it into something else. That is my best advice for you. And that includes part 5 of the 5,000 subscriber Q&A series. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you all soon.